She left the woods behind 12 years ago, but something never forgot her. Hi, my name is Shar, and this is the And Other Stories podcast, where I tell stories of the supernatural and criminal, both real and fictional. We post on Tuesdays and Fridays, and if that's something you're interested in, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. Hunting the devil. The grey cloud pressed down on her as she stood, bag in hand, staring at the broken down house that she had grown up in. The unease in her stomach was growing as she trudged the muddy track, dirt creeping up her designer boots. Creaking stairs welcomed her, peeling paint uncovering the rotten wooden facade of the house. She turned and looked out over the empty fields that she had played in as a child, overgrown weeds leading all the way up to the edge of the dark woods in the distance. A murder of crows took flight from the treetops, and she shuddered and turned back to the door. She didn't bother to knock. The TV was on loud, her father sitting at the table, simultaneously watching a football game at top volume and carving something in wood with a small curved blade. Her mother stopped washing dishes and turned to look at her, a blank expression on her face. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Mum," she said, ignoring the barbed question. "Town looks a bit quiet." She had travelled on the bus to the centre of the small town. One road with a smattering of shops and bars, most of which had now been abandoned and boarded up. One solitary old man sat on a stool next to a barrel, tobacco in his bulging cheek and spitting regularly at the dusty patch of ground in front of him, as he stared at her until she was out of sight. "Oh, it's those people," her mother replied, as she wiped her hands on her beige flower-patterned apron and returned furiously to her washing up. "Driven all the good folks out of town, that family." She gestured with a soapy carving knife out of the window and up the hill towards the large house on the hill. "They all come from bad blood, I know it. Our ancestors, you know." And she turned to her daughter and began gesturing at her earnestly with the same carving knife. "They would have run him out of town by now, burned him at the stake." The knife landed in the washing up bowl with a splash, as her daughter walked to her, gave her a peck on the cheek and a "yes, Mum," before escaping upstairs with her bag, hearing the rants about godless devil worshippers fading with every step. Nothing had changed. The paint was faded, the floors more worn, but nothing had been altered since her childhood. Her feet followed the familiar route to her old room, and she stopped outside her door, taking in the stickers that she had left there so many years ago, running her fingers across the curling edges. Inside, the weak sun shone down through the net curtains onto a fine layer of dust on her belongings from another life. It had been so long since she had been back, and yet her parents hadn't moved a thing. All her toys were in the same place at the end of her bed, her photos pinned onto the wall, smiling with her friends at about the age of 12. Even her notebook on her desk lay open at the page that she had last been drawing. She dropped the bag on the single bed, causing a cloud of dust to fly into the sun rays, and walked toward her desk. The page of the notebook had yellowed at the edges, but in the middle was the image that had brought her here. Surrounded by scribbled black trees, a dark figure, eyes glowing red, a grin spreading on its face. She slammed the notebook shut and moved toward the window. Drawing back the curtain with one finger, she looked again at the forest on the edge of their property. This was why she had come home. She had to know. Maybe then the dreams would stop. The night came on fast in the countryside. No streetlights, no cars, just pitch blackness. It had taken her a while to fall asleep on her cramped bed, but as soon as she did, the nightmare started again. The same one that had plagued her for months. Her bare feet walked on the fallen leaves of the forest floor. The fog sat heavy on the dark trees that surrounded her, and she advanced as if she were looking for something. The dream sped quicker now, as if the proximity to the forest sparked a chain reaction, drawing her to it with velocity. The humming started, the same as always. A child, as if playing, humming an unfamiliar nursery rhyme, echoed through the fog. She knew what was coming next, what always came next, the thing that had plagued her dreams for months, the reason she went back home, and the thing that she had feared ever since she saw it 12 years ago. The hooded figure drifted through the trees, walking from her left, gliding silently, until it stopped, right in the middle of the corridor of dark trees, about 10 meters from her. It turned slowly and looked at her. The red eyes met hers, and she jolted awake, the scream still echoing in her throat. She could only nurse a cup of coffee that morning. Her father sat opposite her, spooning some sort of oat slurry into his mouth, glaring at her, but she took no notice. Her thoughts were plagued with the images from her nightmare, and what she knew she must do today. It was he who had found her that day, cowering under a bush, crying. It had been one of the only times he had shown her any affection. He scooped her up and carried her home, trying to soothe her. As her tears had slowed, she had started to describe what she had seen, tried to ask him what it was. He simply drew his finger slowly up to his lips in a silencing gesture, before he looked swiftly over his shoulder to check they were alone, before simply saying, "Don't speak of it again." He watched her while she was deep in thought, chewing slowly and frowning. His spoon landed in his finished bowl with a clatter, and when he walked past her to the sink, he paused at her shoulder, and quietly and gruffly he said, "You shouldn't have remembered." She had wasted no time packing a backpack and heading to the forest. The long months of fear had called her here like a beacon, drawing her to the woods. She stood at the edge of the trees, dark and misty, just like in the nightmare. Although she had brought a tent and overnight supplies, she did not want to be there any longer than she needed to, so she plunged into the forest. It was cold. Much colder than the surrounding fields had been as she had walked across from the house. But she drew her collar up around her ears and carried on. She knew the route. She had been in these woods for hours as a child. She knew every path, every tree. But she had seen her destination only once, on that day, and she knew it would take hours to get there. She had been walking for miles. It must have been around noon when she stopped. She had not noticed what had changed, but something told her senses that all was not right. As she looked around to the tops of the pines, she realized silence. There was not the rustle of leaves in the breeze or the song of a bird in a tree. Not even the branches swayed. She sat with her back propped against a tree and nibbled slowly on a cracker, her stomach not feeling ready for anything else, and just listened. If she held her breath, there was the lowest and most quiet sound, a creaking murmur of the trees, rumbling deep through the earth. She carried on. She was getting close now. She not only knew from her route, but she could almost feel the atmosphere changing, The air was thick, the trees dense, and she stumbled on more and more detritus of leaves and sticks on the ground as she walked faster. 20 minutes went by, and still she had not found it. She had expected it to be here. Her eyes strained through the tall trees, expecting any second to see the dark outline, but there was nothing. She stopped with an involuntary huff of air released from her lips and turned around, looking in all directions. As she turned to look behind her, she backed quickly away. Dense trees had grown up, impossible to walk through, in the very place she had just come from. The path was completely swallowed up, trees seeming to drift in unfamiliar places, changing her world, making the woods no longer hers. She had only just begun to wonder what to do when it started. The humming quietly, distant and ethereal, echoing through the woods and distorting her sense of direction. She knew it was coming, and yet the fear grabbed her throat like an icy hand. It was then that she noticed the light. It could not have been later than mid-afternoon, but the woods were becoming darker and darker, the fog gathering in beckoning swirls. She turned to run, any direction, when she saw it. The old stone house stood there as if it had been for thousands of years. The woods had grown up around it, claiming it in vines and moss. The chimney was half collapsed, rubble gathered at the base. She felt like her legs had turned to stone, but she knew she had to. She started to advance toward the faded door. She ran her hand along the porch railing, the rough wood full of splinters, and climbed the 3 creaky steps. Heart fluttering like a caged bird, she pushed open the door, only for a rush of cold air to come out to meet her. The room was dusty and cluttered, piles of rubble covering the floor, and furniture broken and rotting. It was hard to see in the darkness. She stumbled on unseen dangers as she crossed the floor, only thinking to reach for the backpack and her torch inside it when she reached the middle of the room. With shaking hands, she shone it at the floor. A circle of something like sticks were arranged in the only clear patch of stone floor. She moved closer to see, but then leapt back in horror. They were not sticks, but bones, too large to be animal, but too small to be adult. Splatters of something dark covered them and the floor beside them, and in the middle of the bone circle, a dirty and old child's doll sat upon a rock the size of her hand. She forced her trembling fingers forward, reaching for it. She brought it up in front of her, brushing its tangled plastic hair away from its face. It was hers, her very own doll she had had as a child, but had lost in these very woods many years ago. But where its eyes had been, there were roughly scribbled X's, and a thin length of string had been tied around its head and over its eyes. She dropped it, readying her weak legs to run, when a shadow in the corner moved. A cloak drifting across the floor, the head turning. She was frozen to the spot as the hood of the figure dropped, eyes glowing red. She raised the shaking torch beam. Its face was hers, distorted and evil. Its mouth was held abnormally wide, like the jaw was dislocated, and as it looked right at her, a blood-curdling scream emanated from it. Dropping the torch, she turned and ran. Her face was cut and bloodied by branches and thorns whipping her face, as if trying to grab her and draw her back, but she did not stop running until she reached her house. Her mother and father barely raised their heads as she exploded through the door, panting and sobbing. She strode straight to her room, and locking the door, she sat in the farthest corner, clutching her knees, rocking back and forth. She would never come here again. She would take the first bus tomorrow back to the city and never return. It had been past midnight when she had managed to fall into a fitful sleep. Her nightmare did not start this time, just flashing images of the woods, the dark trees, the stone house. She did not know why she awoke, only that it had felt as if someone called her name. She lay listening to the silence, an owl calling somewhere outside. Her eyes started to drift closed again when a shadow moved. She started to turn her head, but her ankle was caught in a vice-like grip from something she could not see. She screamed as she was dragged out of her bed, out of her room, and painfully down each step of the stairs. She shouted for her mother, her father, shrieking until her lungs felt they would burst. But no one came. She still shrieked as she was dragged across the field toward the woods, watching her fingernails dig deep furrows in the earth. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked it. My name is Shar, and this is the And Other Stories podcast. See you next time.